Hi students, we will take up for discussion today lesson number 9 of the SBEC module, Startup and its Registration. So it is a very interesting subject, and this term startup, as of today, it is a lot in hype. So what you have to do when you are trying to understand or study this particular chapter, you have to have in your mind that if you want to establish a startup, then how would you do, what would be the benefits, why would you form a startup? Then it becomes easier to have a grasp of this chapter. So let's begin. So in a layman's language, what would be a startup company? When you hear the term, what do you think? Firstly, you think that it's a new company. It's a small scale company which does its work or its business in a very innovative way, right? Whenever you listen that someone is doing a startup, what do you think? You would think that they will be having a very nice technological kind of mindset while doing the business, and they are trying to grow their business with government support. So that would be ordinarily called as a startup company in a layman's language. It's an emerging, fast-growing business setup that aims to solve an unmet need by developing a viable business model around an innovative product, service, processor, or a platform. And these startups, they usually have a high rate of failure. However, when they succeed, then they become really large and influential, right? Now, the government of India, it has started a Startup India initiative. And for being considered as a startup under the Startup India initiative, what is the eligibility criteria? Firstly, the startup has to be incorporated within the last 10 years, and it can either be incorporated or registered as a private company, partnership, or a LLP, right? Then the turnover in any of these 10 financial years should not have crossed 100 crores. Thirdly, the startup should be working towards innovation, development, or improvement of products, processes, or services, or it should have a business model with high potential of employment generation or wealth creation. So if we take each one of these points, so firstly, for being qualified under the Startup India initiative of the government of India, your company, your startup should either be a private company or a partnership or a LLP, and should not be in existence for more than 10 years. 10 years के बाद आप startup count करना नहीं, you won't be counted as a startup. Then during this 10 years, your turnover should not have crossed rupees 100 crore in any financial year. Thirdly, आपका जो nature of business होना चाहिए, it should be inclined towards innovation, development, improvement of what products, processes or services. और एल्स आपका बिजनेस ऐसा होना चाहिए विच हैज अ पोटेंशियल कि आप बहुत सारा एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट कर सकते हो या वेल्थ मल्टीप्लाई कर सकते हो, वेल्थ क्रिएट कर सकते हो, राइट? Also, it should be a new company or a LLP or partnership. If it is formed by splitting up or reconstruction of any existing business, then you won't be qualified under the Startup India initiative. अब once you have a startup, how do you get the recognition? बहुत easy procedure है. एक online application बनाना है, या तो either in the mobile app or a portal which is set up by DPIIT. What is DPIIT? It is the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. So they have created one mobile app और their online portal, वहाँ पे आपको जाके online application बनाना है. And since, as discussed earlier, it has to be a company, partnership firm or LLP, तो आपको उधर आपका certificate of incorporation or registration submit करना है. And also because it says that you have to be involved in innovation, development of processes, etc. So you have to give a write-up about the nature of business. फिर अगर उन्हें आपका business proper लगा, eligible लगा for startup, then they will either accept your application or they will reject the application. Now these startup companies, they also have various tax benefits under section 180 IAC of the Income Tax Act. So वो एक जो definition था, that was under the Startup India initiative of Government of India, but to be qualified as a for deduction of tax benefit under section 81 IAC of the Income Tax Act, you have to startup company should be startup should either be a private limited company or LLP, and it should fulfill the conditions specified in subclause 1 and subclause 2 of the explanation to section 180 IAC of the Companies Act. तो यहाँ पे क्या definition है startup का? Let's look at that. It should be either a company or a LLP, and it should be engaged in the eligible businesses. And additional criteria are, it should be incorporated during the period 1st April 16 to 31st March 19. First criteria. Second criteria, a total turnover of less than or equal to 25 crores in any of the previous year, starting from 1st April 16 to 31st March 19. And it should hold a certificate of eligible business from the notified IMBC. So this is the criteria for tax exemption under section 80 IAC of the Income Tax Act. And IMB, which is stated here, is the interministerial board. Okay. So for the startups which fulfill this criteria, they have to make an application in Form 1 to the interministerial board. If it finds it proper, then it will grant you the certificate or it will reject the application. And what is the benefit under this section 80 IAC? That the startup can avail tax holiday, मतलब पूरा tax exemption for 3 consecutive financial years out of its first 10 years since incorporation. Again, points to remember, only private companies or LLPs are eligible for exemption under section 180 IC as mentioned earlier, and the startup should be incorporated after 1st April 2016. There is additional benefit under section 56 of Companies Act, which is of the Income Tax Act, and it's called angel tax. And to be eligible for this, the entity should be a DPIIT recognized setup. Secondly, aggregate amount of paid up capital plus share premium जो होगा after the proposed issue of shares should not exceed 25 crore. And third criteria, it should not have invested in the following assets, and then ये assets के नाम briefly आपको याद रखने. Various states have got their own startup policies. They try, and the government tries to encourage the state government. The government of India tries to encourage the state government to make nice provisions for the startups in their state. This is nothing, just you can read it. Now this is interesting. What are the exemption for startup? आप क्यों startup company बनाओगे तो आपको क्या क्या exemptions मिलेगा? First thing, it's a simple process, as I told you earlier. सिर्फ एक मोबाइल ऐप या वेबसाइट पे आपको registration करना है और थोड़े से documents upload करने हैं. Then there is a reduction in cost. Why reduction in cost? Because government जो main इनका cost होता है वो innovation के towards होता है. But जो भी intellectual property rights, state ट्रेडमार्क पेटेंट्स वगैरह का होता है, वो ज्यादातर जो भी मनी होता है वो फैसिलिटेट गवर्नमेंट ही कर लेता है. आपको सिर्फ रजिस्ट्रेशन फीस भरना पड़ता है, इसलिए आपका 80% कॉस्ट कम हो जाता है. देन इजी एक्सेस टू फंड. गवर्नमेंट हैज सेट अप 10,000 crore. दिस नरेंद्र मोदी गवर्नमेंट हैज सेट अप अ 10,000 crore fund which is going to help the startups in their funding. Also, the government is also providing guarantee to lenders to encourage banks and other financial institutions for providing venture capital. Venture capital provides funding to the startups. Then, as discussed earlier, under that section 80 IAC, you are eligible for 3 years of exemption. Then you can also apply for government tenders. Then startups होते हैं वो innovative work में वे में वर्क करते हैं, तो इसीलिए गवर्नमेंट हैज प्रोवाइडेड फैसिलिटीज टू सेट अप R&D research parks where these startups they can do research and development. अगेन नो टाइम कंज्यूमिंग compliances, बहुत easy procedure होता है इनका. And also startups have been allowed to self-certify compliance through the startup mobile app with 9 labor and 3 environmental laws. Starting of the chapter में ये labor laws and environmental laws का नाम लिखा है, जिसके अंदर startups can do they can self-certify their compliances. Also, as discussed earlier, there are many tax saving. Okay, जो startups के लिए तो टैक्स सेविंग है ही, प्लस जो स्टार्टअप में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं उन अगर जो व्हाट इट्स रिटन पीपल इन्वेस्टिंग देयर कैपिटल गेन्स, व्हाटएवर कैपिटल गेन्स अ पर्सन हैव, इफ दे invest it in venture fund set up by the government, then they will get exemption from capital gains. तो इन्वेस्टर के लिए भी टैक्स बेनिफिट है और जो स्टार्टअप्स बनाते हैं उनके लिए भी टैक्स बेनिफिट है. So you can remember these points together. Then the startups, they have an option to choose who will be their investors. उनके कंपनी में कौन इन्वेस्ट करेगा, वेंचर कैपिटल फंड्स करेगा या कौन इन्वेस्ट करेगा. इजी एग्जिट, जैसे स्टार्टअप बनाना इजी है वैसे स्टार्टअप क्लोज करना भी इजी है. You can close it within 90 days from the application of winding up. Also, the government has proposed to hold 2 startup fests annually, both nationally and internationally, to enable the various stakeholders of a startup to meet. So इसमें क्या होगा, networking होगा. They are trying to make all the startup entrepreneurs to meet each other. So there are chances that they will be able to create high network opportunities. So these are the tax exemption for startups with effect from 2017-18. Some of them I have already discussed above. Rest you can just have a go through. तो ये हमने डिस्कस किया था अंडर स्टार्टअप इनिशिएटिव ऑफ द एग्जेम्पशंस to a startup under the Government of India Startup Initiative and under the tax laws. Now, what are the benefits provided to a startup under the Companies Act 2013? Let's study that. So, startup, like any other company, means a private company. Now, for the purpose of Companies Act, it is a private company which is incorporated under the Companies Act 2013 and recognized as a startup in accordance with the notification issued by the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So it should be first, it should be recognized as a startup and by this department, and secondly, it should be a company under the Companies Act 13. So जो acceptance of deposit rules है Companies Act के अंदर, under the Companies Acceptance of Deposit Rule, any amount of rupees 25 lakhs or more received by a startup company by way of convertible note in a single transfer of a person will not be treated as a deposit. So deposit rules में उनको exemption है. Also the section for deposit 73 clause A to E में startups को exemption है for a period of 5 years from its incorporation. Also, third, 3 points are related to deposits. Third, maximum limit in respect of deposit to be accepted from members shall not apply. Otherwise, if you see, you would have read in Companies Act कि आप जो shareholders, जो members होते हैं, उनसे certain limit तक ही deposit accept कर सकते हैं. However, for a startup which is a private company, for till 5 years, ये जो limits होंगे, that will not be applicable. Also, startups are allowed to issue ESOPs to an employee who is a promoter or a person belonging to a promoter group or a director holding more than 10% of the outstanding equity shares of a company up to 10 years from the incorporation. So आप ESOP भी provide कर सकते हो up to 10 years, and to whom? To promoters or person belonging to promoter group or a director who holds more than 10% of the outstanding equity shares. Also ESOP है, फिर sweat equity shares भी है. Startup company may issue sweat equity shares not exceeding 50% of its paid up capital up to 5 years from the date of its incorporation or registration. Also एक और एक exemption है under the Companies Act, जो annual return होता है आपका, it can be signed by a company secretary. And अगर company secretary नहीं हो तो even the director can sign. Also for startups, convening at least one board meeting in each half of the calendar year, and the gap between two meetings should not be less than 90 days is sufficient to meet the requirements. जो meeting of the board and its power है, उसमें उन्हें हर half year में सिर्फ one board meeting held करनी है, and the gap between the two meetings shall not be of less than 90 days. अभी registration steps क्या होंगे of a startup. So firstly, it is incorporated as a company. तो company कौन से टाइप की हो सकती है? It can either be a private company, public company or a OPC. This you have already read in Companies Act. It's just related. आप जैसे company बनाते हो वैसे आप startup company भी बना सकते हो. So again, it's a company, so it will have charter documents like the MOA, AOA, which you're already aware about. फिर जो भी लीगल फॉर्मेलिटीज होती है, प्री इनकॉर्पोरेशन फॉर्मेलिटीज, जैसे कि आप नई कंपनी बना रहे हो तो आपको डीएससी डिन चाहिए, फिर आप स्पाइस फॉर्म्स फाइल करोगे, DI3 KYC फाइल करोगे एटसेट्रा. एंड पोस्ट इनकॉर्पोरेशन फॉर्मेलिटीज क्या होगी? दैट द कंपनी विल हैव अ सेपरेट लीगल एंटिटी, उसका पैन नंबर होगा, टैन नंबर होगा. दिस इज जस्ट रिलेटेड टू द कंपनीज एक्ट. आप जैसे कंपनी बनाते हो वैसे आप स्टार्टअप कंपनी बना सकते हो. What are the few important points for a startup company? सब सिर्फ रीडिंग थिंग्स है. First, it should have the right legal structure. You have to consider all the legal aspects before forming a startup. Registration and business licenses. आप जब स्पाइस फॉर्म फिल कर रहे हो तो स्पाइस एंड अजाइल फॉर्म, तो आप उसमें किस किस चीज के लिए अप्लाई कर रहे हो? एम्प्लॉयर कोड, फिर इंपोर्टर एक्सपोर्टर कोड, ESIC वगैरह के लिए, GSTIN, वो सब आपको ध्यान में रखना है. इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी प्रोटेक्शन. स्टार्टअप एंड इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी, दीज टू थिंग्स आपके दिमाग में एक साथ होनी चाहिए. अगर स्टार्टअप है तो वो इनोवेशन वगैरह में इन्वॉल्व है, तो दे हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल दैट दे आर रजिस्टरिंग देयर इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी, ट्रेडमार्क्स, पेटेंट्स, कॉपीराइट्स. ऑल्सो यू हैव टू असर्टेन हु विल बी गिविंग योर फाउंडर इक्विटी, मतलब जो आपके प्रमोटर्स कौन होंगे. स्प्लिट एंड वेस्टिंग, मतलब मिस्टर ए एंड मिस्टर बी, तो मिस्टर ए का जो क्या कंट्रीब्यूशन होगा इन द स्टार्टअप, उसके अकॉर्डिंग उसका इक्विटी कंट्रीब्यूशन आएगा. मिस्टर बी का क्या रोल होगा आपके स्टार्टअप में, उसके अकॉर्डिंग उसका इक्विटी कंट्रीब्यूशन आएगा. और वेस्ट कब होगा, दैट ऑल इज इम्पोर्टेंट. देन आपको आपके प्रमोटर्स, जो स्टार्टअप्स होते हैं उसमें द प्रमोटर्स दे हैव टू एंटर इनटू फाउंडर अग्रीमेंट्स. दे हैव टू डिफाइन हाउ, व्हाट, इन व्हाट वे योर स्टार्टअप विल फंक्शन एटसेट्रा. रोल्स रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी क्या होगी. स्टार्टअप हो, कोई भी कंपनी होगी या कोई भी स्टार्टअप होगा, तो इट हैज टू एंटर इनटू एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स, टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस क्या होगा एम्प्लॉयज का, कस्टमर्स का, क्लाइंट्स का, दैट. देन ESOP, बिकॉज इन अ स्टार्टअप यू नीड टू motivate your employees to be innovative, so you can offer them ESOPs. So what will be your ESOP structure? थर्ड पार्टी अग्रीमेंट्स, आप जब बाहर के लोगों के साथ डील करोगे कोई भी कंपनी में, तो व्हाट वुड बी द अग्रीमेंट्स विद द कस्टमर्स. फिर आपका जो इन्वेस्टमेंट स्ट्रक्चर, यू एक्सपेक्ट whom to invest in your companies, angels, funds, HNIs, आप किसको सीख कर रहे हो to invest in your company. And again, at the same time, when you are taking care of the above points, you don't have to forget compliance. You have to give importance to compliance also, whether it's taxation laws, compliance, companies act law, etc., and other legal and environmental laws. Now, what are the different financing options available for startup company? So यहाँ या तो एक स्टार्टअप के अंदर इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल में लोग इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं, या डेट डिबेंचर्स में कर सकते हैं, या थर्ड ऑप्शन है ग्रांट्स. तो इक्विटी में कौन इन्वेस्ट करेगा? एंजल इन्वेस्टर्स, सेल्फ फाइनेंसिंग, फैमिली एंड फ्रेंड्स, वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट, क्राउड फंडिंग, इंक्यूबेटर्स, एक्सेलरेटर्स. डेट के फॉर्म में कौन इन्वेस्ट करेगा इन स्टार्टअप्स? बैंक्स, NBFC, गवर्नमेंट लोन स्कीम्स एटसेट्रा. एंड ग्रांट्स, डोनेशंस कौन देता है स्टार्टअप को? सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, कॉर्पोरेट चैलेंजेस, ग्रांट प्रोग्राम ऑफ प्राइवेट एंटिटी. Now next point, nature of financing. जब इक्विटी में फाइनेंस होगा, इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल में, तो there is no component of repayment of investment funds. However, जब डेट में फाइनेंसिंग होगा, तो द डेट फंड नीड टू बी रीपेड अलोंग विद इंटरेस्ट. एंड जब ग्रांट्स में होगा, अगेन गवर्नमेंट ग्रांट्स में कुछ भी रीपेमेंट टर्म्स नहीं होते हैं. सो रिलेटेड टू द फर्स्ट पॉइंट इज द सेकंड पॉइंट, रिस्क. रिस्क में रिस्क ज्यादा है इक्विटी इन्वेस्टमेंट में, बिकॉज नो गारंटी रिटर्न इज देयर. However, in debt financing, usually जो डिबेंचर्स होते हैं वो सिक्योर्ड होते हैं, कोलैटरल सिक्योरिटी होती है, इसलिए रिस्क इज लेस. And again, there is no risk setup for startup as no if in case of government grants, there is no risk factor as no collateral security. Pressure for repayment. Equity share capital hoga to less pressure is there for the startups to repayment. However, they have to try to achieve their targets. Then in case of debt, वो repay करना पड़ता है, इसीलिए उनपे ज़्यादा pressure होता है. एंड अगेन गवर्नमेंट ग्रांट्स होता है, इट इज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ डोनेशन और मॉनेटरी सपोर्ट फॉर अ स्पेसिफिक पर्पस, इसलिए कुछ भी रीपेमेंट का प्रेशर नहीं होता है. So what is the return to the investor in case of equity share capital investment in startup? It will be capital growth. उनका capital का value increase होगा. In case of debentures, debt, it will be interest repayment, and grant is like a donation, so no return is there. Involvement in decision. The equity shareholders, they have got full involvement in the decision making. Debt fund, they do not, they have very less role in the decision making. And in case of grants, there is no direct involvement in decision making. Just a new term, seed capital. What is seed capital? Is the initial capital used at the time of starting a business. You can just read through this. Abhi, again in detail, they are just describing what are the equity and debt financing ke options. So first, startups are usually equity finance or funded by way of venture capital or private equity investor or angel investors. So first option है venture capital या private equity. The venture capital or private equity जो funding होता है, this they are usually by way of convertible instrument. मतलब या तो compulsorily convertible preference shares, which is also called as CCPS, और CCD compulsory convertible debentures. इनका मतलब क्या होता है कि इनको जो हम venture capital या private equity shareholders को convertible preference shares या debentures issue करते हैं, and after certain time period these preference shares get converted into equity shares, or these debentures get converted into equity shares. So because they are based on various terms and conditions of conversion, so the investor and the startup company will enter into non-binding offer letters, and due diligence hota hai. They study about the startup, unka kya business hoga, etc. So इनका funding process कैसा होता है? How do these venture capitals and private equities invest in startups? First, a term sheet or letter of intent or MOU is signed, right? Then share subscription agreement या debenture, अगर preference share तो share subscription agreement, debentures है तो debenture subscription agreement में enter करोगे. This is regarding subscription. उसके बाद होगा shareholders agreement होगा. Shareholders agreement will speak about the information and reporting rights and disclosure obligation of investee to the investors, redemption rights, जो भी terms and conditions होगा between the investor and the company. उसके बाद क्या होगा? Issuance of securities, मतलब CCPS या CCDs आप उनको आप allot कर दोगे shareholders को through private placement process. अभी आपने अलॉटमेंट किया तो आप जो आरओसी है उसको इन्फॉर्म करोगे विद द नेसेसरी ई फॉर्म विच इज PAS 3. फिर आपने जो शेयर होल्डर्स एग्रीमेंट एंटर किया है उसके अकॉर्डिंग आप आपका ऑल्टरेशन ऑफ AOA करोगे, एंड देन whatever the completion of condition subsequent that will take place, and normally a startup company will start. एंजल इन्वेस्टर्स क्या होता है? फर्स्ट हमने देखा है वेंचर कैपिटल या प्राइवेट इक्विटी इन्वेस्टर, सेकंड इज एंजल इन्वेस्टर. Angel investors are usually individual or group of industry professionals who are willing to fund a venture in return for a stake in equity, and as per the SEBI definition, these should be the criteria. फिर और options है bridge round and series funding. You can just read all this once. It is not really very important. आपको सिर्फ टाइप्स याद करने हैं मोस्टली. तो हमने इक्विटी फंडिंग देखा, अभी डेट फंडिंग. डेट फंडिंग कैसे मिलेगी स्टार्टअप्स को? आइदर इन द फॉर्म ऑफ लोन्स टू फ्रॉम बैंक्स और NBFC कंपनीज. बैंक्स एंड NBFC कंपनीज दे गिव लोन्स टू द स्टार्टअप कंपनीज, राइट. एंड बहुत सारे थोड़ा सा डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इन्वॉल्व होता है इसमें, जैसे एप्लीकेशन बनाना पड़ता है. फिर बैंक आपको लोन सैंक्शन करेगी. Once the loan is sanctioned, you will enter into a loan agreement, and वो secured loan होता है. इसके लिए आपको security document एक करना होगा, which would be a mortgage deed or hypothecation deed, deed of guarantee or share pledge agreement or MOE. Very easy. External commercial borrowings in the form of banks, loan, buyers credit, supplier credit, securitized instruments. ये वे में ECB borrowings कर सकते हैं startups, and it can be either through approval route or automatic route. And main thing to remember, जो ECB से जो money startups ने लिया है, they cannot be used for this for following points: for onward lending or investment in capital market, acquiring a company, real estate, ये सब में allowed नहीं. You have to abide by the guidelines issued by RBI in case of taking investment from external commercial borrowing. उसके बाद एक third category है CGTMSE loans. This is the Credit Guarantee Trust for Micro and Small Enterprise Scheme. ये एक scheme launch की है by the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises by the government to encourage entrepreneurs to get loan up to 1 crore तक आप loan ले सकते हो without any security. Okay. Now, once the startup is able to achieve stable operation revenue flow, it may also consider as an IPO. तो पहले एक बार startup बन गई है, उसके बाद अगर आपको लगे कि your startup company has lot of capability, आपको और funding चाहिए, तो you can go for IPO if you want to increase the magnitude of your business operations. Also, you can just read through. There are some unconventional and new modes of financing options which are becoming popular in India, like crowdfunding. इसमें क्या होता है? Large number of people, they usually through internet they collect small amounts, and ये जो money होता है वो startups में invest होता है. फिर incubators होता है. Incubators क्या होता है? वो आपको office space, administrative support, legal compliances, आपको बाकी facilities देते हैं. They incubate you so that you can set up your businesses. And usually incubators क्या होता है? IIM, Microsoft Accelerator, ये सब example. Mudra banks. Mudra banks are the micro units development and refinance agency bank. It is a public sector finance institution in India. वो क्या करते हैं? Mudra banks क्या करते हैं? They provide loans at low rate to microfinance institution and NBFCs. और फिर ये जो NBFCs और microfinance institution होते हैं, they provide loans to MSMEs, मतलब medium and small scale, micro, medium and small scale industries. And उनका जो workflow, the way these Mudra offerings offer, that is mentioned in this table. You can just go through the loan, and they have briefly mentioned के procedure क्या होता है. They offer 3 types of loans: Shishu loan up to 50,000, Kishore loan between 50,000 to 5 lakh, and Tarun loan between 5 lakh to 10 lakh. And इनका procedure for obtaining loan from Mudra bank, that is mentioned here. थोड़े जो भी documents होते हैं that you have to submit to them. And मुद्रा लोन्स में कौन कौन सी एक्टिविटीज कवर हो सकती है वो यहाँ पे मेंशन की. मुद्रा कार्ड भी देता है ये मुद्रा बैंक्स. व्हाट इज इट? मुद्रा कार्ड इज अ डेबिट कार्ड विच इज इशूड अगेंस्ट द मुद्रा लोन फॉर वर्किंग कैपिटल. जस्ट एज आप डेबिट कार्ड यूज करते हो, उसको स्वाइप करते हो, आपको जो मनी होता है डे टू डे एक्सपेंसेस के लिए यूज करते हो, वैसे मुद्रा लोन का डेबिट कार्ड होता है, उसमें वो आप यूज कर सकते हो, स्वाइप कर सकते हो फॉर द वर्किंग कैपिटल रिक्वायरमेंट. एंड दे कैन हैव मल्टीपल ड्रॉज एंड क्रेडिट. Mudra card can also be operated across the country for withdrawal of cash from any ATM, micro ATM, and also this is just nothing but just like a debit card. आप जैसे debit card swipe करते हो वैसे आप Mudra card use कर सकते हो. Yeah, so that's about it. I hope you like the video.